Omar Kamau stood by the wide balcony of his mansion, the sprawling cityscape below, alive with bustling streets and distant calls to prayer. His hands tightened around the ornate railings as a memory resurfaced. Ngozi's laughter shared with him, the woman who had replaced him in her life. The betrayal wasn't just personal, it was public. Omar, a man of wealth and influence, now stood exposed to whispers questioning his dignity and strength. But Omar Kamau wasn't one to wallow. He needed to act, not to reclaim Ngozi, but to reaffirm his own standing and resolve. The idea came to him with quiet clarity, like the faint rustle of the breeze carrying the scent of protea. Amina, modest and unassuming, was unlike the women in Omar's social circles. Her quiet grace and unadorned beauty stood apart from the polished sophistication of someone like Ngozi, reliable, reserved, and unnoticed. Amina was the perfect choice for Omar's calculated plan. The following morning, Omar descended the staircase of his mansion, its marble steps cool beneath his feet, and found Amina arranging a tray of tea in the sitting room. "Amina," he said firmly. She paused, startled. "Yes, Mr. Kamau. I need you to accompany me to an event tomorrow evening," he continued. Amina blinked, unsure if she had heard correctly. "Me? To an event?" "Yes," Omar replied, his tone leaving no room for doubt. "It requires someone who is different, someone grounded and genuine. You fit the role." Amina's eyes widened, her heart racing. "But Mr. Kamau, I am your assistant, not someone to accompany you to gatherings of your world." Omar's expression didn't falter. "This is not a request. I will compensate you generously enough to settle any debts or to continue your studies, if that's what you need." Amina hesitated, the weight of his words heavy. She thought of her brother's medical bills, the financial strain on her family, and how this could be an answer to their prayers. But her pride pricked at the idea. "I will think about it," she said finally, her voice steady but uncertain. Omar nodded briefly. "Good, let me know soon." When Amina agreed, it was not with ease. She reminded herself that this was for her family, her future, not for him. Still, reality struck the next morning when a sleek car arrived to take her to an upscale boutique. Inside, Omar was already inspecting racks of traditional and elegant gowns. "You're late," he remarked without looking up, his voice devoid of warmth. Amina bit her tongue, following him reluctantly as he scrutinized the garments. When she protested against a particularly elaborate and fitted dress, he dismissed her with a curt, "Elegance matters more than comfort. Tomorrow you represent my image. Every detail counts." After what felt like hours, Amina emerged in a flowing emerald gown, modest yet striking, tailored to perfection, covering her as was appropriate while enhancing her natural beauty. She barely recognized the woman staring back at her in the mirror. Omar studied her with a calculating gaze. "It will suffice," he said finally, his approval distant. On the drive back, Omar outlined his expectations. "Stay close to me. Speak only when spoken to. You are there to reflect dignity and composure." Amina turned to him, her brows furrowed. "And what exactly are you trying to prove, Mr. Kamau?" Omar's jaw tightened, his voice lowering. "It's not about proving anything, Amina. It's about showing the world, and myself, that no one defines my worth, not even Ngozi." For the first time, Amina glimpsed past his carefully constructed persona. Beneath his confident facade lay the scars of betrayal and wounded pride. His arrogance wasn't as solid as it seemed. She wanted to challenge him, to say what she truly thought, but his intensity silenced her. She knew her role in this was clear: follow the plan and keep her emotions at bay. That evening, as Amina sat in her modest home, she stared at the gown hanging neatly in the corner. Her thoughts were restless. What had she gotten herself into? Omar's words echoed in her mind. "Tomorrow, all eyes will be on us." It felt less like an opportunity and more like a burden. The world she was about to step into was unfamiliar, and the part she was expected to play felt overwhelming. Yet she reminded herself of her purpose. This was a temporary role, a means to an end. Amina prayed for strength, knowing that the night ahead would test her resolve in ways she had never imagined. The next morning, Amina's modest apartment was abuzz with activity. Omar Kamau had arranged for a team to prepare her for the event. Her hair was styled elegantly, her makeup understated, yet enhancing her features. And the gown she wore, modest yet exquisite, was like something out of a dream. As she glanced at her reflection in the mirror, she barely recognized herself for a brief moment. The weight of the plan, Omar, and even Gozi faded away, and she felt a glimmer of empowerment, a spark of confidence. Just as she was processing her transformation, Omar entered the room, his tailored suit perfectly reflecting his authority. For the first time, Amina noticed a magnetic quality about him, even though his demeanor remained distant and controlled. "Well," he said flatly, though a faint smile tugged at the corner of his lip, "this will work." "Thanks, I guess," Amina replied, a hint of sarcasm slipping into her tone. She couldn't resist a small smirk despite her apprehension. The drive to the gala was quiet, the only sound coming from the car's soft engine. Amina stared out of the window, her hands fidgeting in her lap. She tried to steady the nervous energy building inside her. She was stepping into an unfamiliar world, guided by a man who seemed incapable of showing genuine emotion. When they arrived at the grand venue, Omar turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Tonight, you are my companion. Act as if you belong." She met his gaze, took a deep breath, and replied, "I don't need to act, Omar. I just need to get through this." Inside, the event was a showcase of power and influence. The room was filled with prominent figures, business leaders, community dignitaries, and a few public personalities. The air was rich with the aroma of fine Ethiopian coffee and the low murmur of strategic conversations across the room. Gozi stood in a circle of friends, her laughter clear and bright. Amina felt a knot tighten in her chest. Not of fear, but a sharp awareness of how out of place she was in this world of elegance and privilege. "Don't let them intimidate you," Omar said softly, his tone firm as if he had read her mind. He led her through the crowd where they were greeted by an older gentleman with a warm smile. "Omar, I wasn't expecting to see you tonight and with such a remarkable guest." Omar shook the man's hand confidently. "It was worth attending, Kwame. After all, Ngozi and I share some history." Amina's eyebrows rose slightly at the comment, but she held her tongue, masking her surprise with a polite smile. As the evening unfolded, Amina observed Omar's ability to command attention with ease. His words were measured, his presence commanding. In contrast, Amina felt like a novice, doing her best to navigate the environment with poise. She followed his lead carefully, not drawing unnecessary attention. Eventually, Ngozi approached her, her flowing white abaya as pristine as her smile. "Omar, what a surprise," she said, her gaze shifting to Amina. "And who is your companion?" Before Omar could respond, Amina stepped forward, extending her hand confidently. "Amina, it's a pleasure to meet you, Ngozi." Ngozi arched her brow, taken aback by Amina's self-assurance, but she accepted the handshake gracefully. "The pleasure is mine. I didn't expect Omar to bring someone so captivating." Omar's jaw tightened subtly, his irritation evident. "Amina has been an incredible support. She understands me in ways few others do." Ngozi's smile sharpened as her eyes assessed Amina with calculated curiosity. "Fascinating, Amina. We must chat later. I'd love to learn more about you." Amina nodded politely, though she knew the invitation was far from genuine. As the evening wore on, Amina grew increasingly aware of whispers and glances directed her way. Occasionally, she caught snippets of judgmental comments from women in the room, yet she stood firm, reminding herself to hold her dignity intact. When the music began, Omar approached her and extended his hand. "You've done well so far. Now we need to dance." "Dance?" Amina's confidence wavered. "I don't," he interrupted, guiding her gently to the dance floor. "Just follow my lead." To her surprise, Omar moved gracefully, guiding her with ease. Amina stumbled at first but quickly adjusted to the rhythm. His grip was steady but respectful, his presence reassuring. As they danced, Amina caught his gaze for a moment and saw something unusual, warmth breaking through his usual cold demeanor. It startled her, but it also steadied her for that fleeting moment. The stares and whispers around her faded into the background. Amina danced, focusing only on the moment. Though brief, It felt like a glimpse into a version of herself she hadn't yet met, a woman capable of holding her ground in an unfamiliar world. "You're doing better than I expected," Omar Kamau said, breaking the silence as they moved together to the rhythm of the music. Amina let out a quiet, nervous laugh, her unease masked by her calm demeanor. "And you're a better dancer than I imagined," she replied lightly. Their exchange was interrupted by Ngozi, who approached with her signature poise, her presence commanding the room. "Omar, would you mind if I borrow your companion for a moment?" Omar hesitated, his gaze flickering briefly to Amina before nodding. "Of course, but don't keep her too long." Amina followed Ngozi to a quieter corner of the opulent hall, where the hum of conversation was a mere whisper. Ngozi's perfectly curated smile didn't reach her eyes, and Amina braced herself for the inevitable. "So, Amina," Ngozi began, her tone light but edged with calculation, "how did Omar find you?" "I am not sure I understand your question," Amina replied steadily, refusing to let her unease show. Ngozi's polite interrogation ended quickly, but the encounter left Amina with a knot of discomfort in her chest. Returning to Omar's side, she masked her unease, but he immediately noticed. "What did Ngozi say to you?" Omar asked, his sharp eyes filled with concern. "Nothing I couldn't handle," Amina replied curtly, unwilling to share the details. Later that evening, as applause erupted to celebrate Ngozi and her new husband, Amina caught Omar shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His usual composed confidence seemed to waver, sensing his unease. Amina leaned closer and offered a small, reassuring smile. To her surprise, he returned it, his stiff posture relaxing slightly as the event came to an end. Omar and Amina bid farewell to the guests. On the drive home, Omar finally broke the silence. "You did better than I expected tonight," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Thanks, I think," Amina replied with a faint hint of sarcasm. "No, I mean it, Omar." He hesitated, uncharacteristically uncertain. "You were perfect." Caught off guard, Amina didn't know how to respond. For all his arrogance, this moment of vulnerability made her question the man beneath the polished exterior. The next morning, Amina woke up replaying the whirlwind of the previous evening. She had managed to make an impression, but Omar's behavior lingered in her thoughts. His pride and vulnerability seemed to be locked in a constant battle, especially when Ngozi was involved. Meanwhile, Omar wasted no time returning to his meticulously scheduled routine. By early morning, he was seated in a meeting with potential investors. Yet rumors about his appearance at the wedding with Amina began to spread rapidly. Guests, particularly those in Ngozi's circle, were quick to speculate about Amina's role in Omar's life. Ngozi, ever opportunistic, fanned the flames of gossip during a conversation with an influential investor. She remarked with a sly smile, "Omar has always had a unique taste in his associates. Makes one wonder if she's there for merit or convenience." The insinuation took root, and by lunchtime, one of the investors approached Omar directly. "Your companion at the wedding, Amina, is she? She's intriguing, very determined, I'd say." The comment hit a nerve. Already irritated by Ngozi's meddling, Omar felt his frustration rise. The rumors gnawed at his pride, intensifying the simmering tension beneath his composed exterior. That afternoon, Amina was summoned to Omar's office. The atmosphere was heavy with unspoken tension as she stepped inside. Omar sat behind his large desk, his expression severe, as he glanced at a folder in front of him. "You wanted to see me?" Amina asked, keeping her voice neutral. Omar looked up, his sharp gaze meeting hers. "Yes, we need to clarify something." Amina stepped closer, crossing her arms defensively. "What's going on?" He slid the folder across the desk. "There are rumors about you speaking with investors at the wedding. What exactly did you say?" Stunned, Amina blinked, trying to process the accusation. "Speaking with investors? Omar, I barely spoke to anyone except Ngozi and a few people who approached me." "And what did you discuss?" He pressed, his tone edged with suspicion. Amina's temper flared. "Discussed. I did exactly what you asked of me. I stayed by your side, smiled when necessary, and played the part. The only time I wasn't with you was when Ngozi pulled me aside." Omar stood abruptly, his hands pressing firmly on the desk. "Ngozi," he muttered, realization dawning. Of course she orchestrated this, and you walked right into her trap? Amina's jaw dropped as she squared her shoulders. Are you serious right now? You're blaming me for this? Her disbelief was met with Omar pacing the room, torn between anger and a deeper, more vulnerable emotion. As the cracks in his confident facade began to show, Amina's walls went up. She could sense his internal struggle, but instead of sympathy, she felt her own frustration mounting. You're blaming me for something I didn't even know happened? That's not fair, Amina said, her tone firm yet controlled, her frustration evident. Omar Kamau, seated behind his grand oak desk, barely glanced at her as he interrupted. You've drawn unnecessary attention. Amina, I trusted you with a simple task, and you failed to meet expectations. His words landed like a blow, but Amina refused to back down. You're saying this is my fault? You put me in this position, Omar. I didn't ask for it. Omar exhaled deeply, visibly trying to rein in his emotions. This isn't working, he said coldly. It's better if we end this arrangement now. Consider yourself relieved of your responsibilities. Amina froze, the word relieved echoing in her mind like a warning. Relieved? Are you firing me? She asked, disbelief lacing her voice. That's correct, Omar replied, his tone firm. This dynamic no longer works. The finality in his voice stung. Amina felt her pride push against the rising indignation, but she knew arguing would be pointless. With her head held high, she replied, If that's your decision, I'll accept it. But remember this, Omar. You're making a mistake. She turned and left the room, her steps measured, though her heart ached. The sting wasn't just from losing her position. It was the way Omar had dismissed her as if she were an insignificant part of his life. The following days were challenging without her income. Amina faced mounting financial pressures, and the future seemed daunting. Yet instead of succumbing to despair, she chose to channel her frustration into something constructive. She revisited an idea she had long held close, creating sustainable home decor pieces inspired by African artisanal tradition, using recycled materials and her natural flair for design. Amina began crafting unique items. Her project started small. She photographed her work and shared it online, gaining the attention of friends and community members. Soon, her creativity began to draw interest from local bloggers and eco-conscious customers. Orders started to pour in, turning what seemed like a devastating setback into a fresh opportunity for growth. Meanwhile, Omar was struggling in his own way. The persistent whispers about Ngozi and lingering rumors from the gala continued to erode his carefully built reputation. Though he refused to acknowledge it outwardly, Omar's mind often wandered to Amina. He couldn't shake the image of her unwavering determination when she had walked out of his office, her quiet strength leaving an impression he couldn't ignore. One morning, as he reviewed his financial reports, an email caught his eye. It was a featured article on a popular African design website celebrating the work of an emerging entrepreneur, Amina. Intrigued, Omar clicked the link and found himself scrolling through images of her creations. The designs were bold, thoughtful, and undeniably hers. For a brief moment, admiration flickered in him, mingled with discomfort. Amina was thriving without him, carving a path that showcased her resilience. In contrast, his own life seemed increasingly fraught with complications. That evening, at a networking event, Omar struggled to stay focused. The chatter around him felt distant until he overheard someone mentioning Amina's name. It seemed her reputation was growing even in circles he frequented. The realization unsettled him. He needed to see her. Amina, however, was too consumed with her growing business to notice. Her small studio was abuzz with activity as orders for her sustainable decor pieces grew daily, and she worked tirelessly to meet the demand. Exhaustion was constant, but so was her sense of purpose. For the first time in a long while, Amina felt in control of her destiny. One evening, as she wrapped up her work, her phone buzzed. The screen lit up with a message from Omar. For a moment, her heart skipped, her pulse quickening after weeks of silence. There he was, asking to speak with her. But why? What could he possibly want now after discarding me so easily? Determined not to let him disrupt her hard-won progress, Amina ignored the message and focused instead on her work. Her mindset was set on fulfilling the commitments she had made. Omar, meanwhile, found himself increasingly preoccupied. Amina's silence irked him in ways he wasn't ready to admit. He tried to convince himself that his curiosity about her success was purely professional. After all, it wasn't common for someone he had dismissed to not only move on, but to thrive in such a significant way. Yet deep down, he knew there was more to it. The memory of Amina's composed yet defiant departure lingered. Unlike the people in his orbit who often sought his approval or favor, Amina had challenged him in ways he hadn't anticipated. She had left an indelible mark, and no amount of rationalizing could erase it. "Mr. Kamau, the investor you mentioned, wants to arrange a meeting," his assistant called, pulling him from his thoughts. Omar straightened in his chair, brushing off the distraction. Yet deep within, he knew this wasn't the last time Amina would cross his mind or his life. "Yes, set it up for tomorrow," Omar replied distractedly, his mind still preoccupied with her. He couldn't shake the thought of her. He needed to see her face to face, not to apologize. That wasn't something he did easily, but instead he wanted to understand how she had managed to recover and rise so quickly. The next morning, Amina was busy organizing a new wave of orders in her modest workshop when a knock at the door interrupted her focus. Her heart raced as she glanced through the peephole and saw Omar standing there. Taking a deep breath, she opened the door, her expression guarded. "What are you doing here?" she asked, crossing her arms. Omar, as impeccably dressed as ever, stood with an unusual softness in his demeanor. "We need to talk," Amina let out a humorous laugh. "You made it perfectly clear how you feel about me, Omar. What could we possibly have to discuss?" "About many things," he said, surprising her. She raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Is this your way of apologizing?" He took a step forward but stopped himself, his frustration barely masked. "Yes, I was impulsive and unfair to you," Amina echoed, her tone sharp with sarcasm. "You accused me of something I didn't do, humiliated me, and dismissed me without a second thought." Omar lowered his gaze, visibly uncomfortable. "I know I acted like a fool." Amina inhaled deeply, trying to steady her emotions. "Why are you here, Omar?" "Omar?" he began, running a hand through his hair, visibly frustrated. "No, not at all. I've seen what you've been doing, Amina. Your work is extraordinary. I had to see you." "And," she interrupted, her voice firm, "take credit for my success now?" Her words seemed to strike him. He paused before responding, his voice quieter. "No, I just wanted to say that I admire what you've achieved. You've built something incredible, even after what I did." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She studied him, unsure of his intentions. Omar, the man who always exuded confidence and control, now stood before her with a vulnerability she had never seen. "Admiration doesn't change anything, Omar," Amina said firmly. "I built this on my own, without anyone's help. If anything, you were just an obstacle I had to overcome." He nodded in acceptance. "I know, but I hope one day you'll forgive me." Amina didn't respond. Instead, she closed the door, leaving Omar standing outside. In the days that followed, Amina buried herself in her work, determined to forget the encounter. But no matter how hard she tried, Omar's words lingered in her thoughts. His seemingly genuine regret was something she hadn't expected. Omar, on the other hand, was resolute in his desire to make amends. Inspired by Amina's resilience, he began researching her work more deeply and was struck by the positive impact her creations were having. For the first time, he found himself considering ways to use his influence for something meaningful. At a meeting with a group of investors, Omar presented a proposal to fund small entrepreneurs with innovative ideas. "We need more projects that make a difference," he said, surprising even himself with the conviction in his voice. Meanwhile, Amina received an unexpected invitation to showcase her work at a local design exhibition. "Welcome, Amina," he said, his smile polite but neutral. "I'm here for the project." "Omar, let's keep this focused," she responded firmly. Omar nodded, respecting the boundary she had set. "Of course, I want you to see this as a partnership. Your ideas are critical." The meeting proceeded with a professional tone. Omar introduced the project, a sustainable corporate building designed to minimize its environmental impact. Amina took notes, keeping her interactions with Omar strictly business. but she couldn't help but notice how he went out of his way to highlight her contributions, something he had never done before. After the meeting, as she walked to the exit, Omar spoke. "Thank you for agreeing to work with us." "I'm here because the project matters," Amina replied, her voice steady, "but that doesn't change the past." Omar looked as if he understood. "I know, but I hope that over time we can start fresh." Amina didn't respond. She simply nodded and left, determined to focus on the work ahead. In the following days, Amina threw herself into the project. She led the creative team with a clear vision, and her dedication didn't go unnoticed. Her interactions with Omar remained frequent but strictly professional. He seemed different, more collaborative, less domineering. One day during a meeting, as Amina presented an idea for the interior design, one of the investors raised a concern. "This approach seems risky. Why should we trust this direction?" Before Amina could answer, Omar spoke up. "Because I trust her work. Amina has the experience and the vision. If she believes this is the best direction for the project, I stand by it." Amina was taken aback by Omar's public endorsement, but she didn't show it. She calmly continued to explain her proposal, eventually winning the investor's approval. After the meeting, she sought out Omar. "Why did you do that?" she asked, her voice steady, yet laced with curiosity. "Because it was the right thing to do," he replied, as though the answer were obvious. "Since when do you care about what's right?" Amina shot back. His eyes flickered with something unreadable, but he didn't respond further. The conversation ended there. Amina's mind was left spinning. She wasn't sure what had just shifted between them, but for the first time, she realized that Omar Kamau wasn't the same man he had been before. Omar Kamau offered a faint smile, an unusual softness in his expression that took Amina by surprise. His sincerity left her momentarily speechless. As their project progressed, the dynamic between them began to shift. Omar, once guarded and distant, started showing a more open side. Amina noticed the small but thoughtful gestures, a cup of coffee placed on her desk during long meetings, his genuine praise for her contributions in front of the team. One evening, after an exhausting day, Omar approached her with an unexpected invitation. "Would you join me for dinner?" he asked. Amina hesitated, unsure of the intent. "Is this work-related?" she asked cautiously. "No," Omar admitted. "Just a conversation between two people." She deliberated for a moment before nodding. "All right, just dinner." At the restaurant, the atmosphere was relaxed, a departure from their usual professional exchanges. Omar spoke of his childhood, the challenges he faced as he built his business, and even his unspoken aspirations. Amina listened intently, surprised at his vulnerability. "I always thought success was everything," he said, his voice contemplative. "But lately I've started to wonder if it's enough." "Success doesn't mean much if you don't have someone to share it with," Amina replied without thinking. "Omar, you're right." Their eyes met briefly, a silent understanding passing between them. But Amina quickly averted her gaze. It was too soon to let her guard down. The next day, Amina was met with unexpected news. One of the decorative pieces she had designed for the project was featured in a prominent African design magazine. Omar had publicly credited her work, further elevating her profile. While she appreciated the recognition, Amina remained cautious. She couldn't shake the feeling that Omar's transformation, though seemingly genuine, might be calculated. As the project advanced, she realized the biggest challenge lay ahead, determining if Omar truly deserved her trust. The sustainable building project was nearing completion, and Amina stood at the center of a conference room presenting the team's progress. Her vision and meticulous planning had earned her the respect of both the investors and the team, even those who had initially doubted her. Omar, seated at the head of the table, observed in silence. Unlike before, he rarely interrupted her presentations, now opting instead to show his support. His gaze lingered on her, but it wasn't just admiration for her professionalism, it was something deeper. After the meeting ended, Omar approached Amina as they walked down the corridor. "You've done remarkable work," he said sincerely. "Thank you," she replied, keeping her voice neutral. Omar hesitated before continuing. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about what you said that night about success and who you share it with." Amina stopped and turned to face him. "Omar, I'm here to do my job. Let's not blur the lines. He lowered his gaze, seemingly holding back words he wanted to say. Fair enough, he said softly. But perhaps one day you'll understand what I'm trying to convey. Amina didn't respond. She simply walked away, ignoring the strange feeling his words stirred within her. As the project neared its conclusion, Amina began noticing discrepancies in the financial reports. Some budget decisions seemed contradictory to the sustainable message Omar had so strongly emphasized. It wasn't something she could ignore. That Tuesday, she confronted him directly, her tone unwavering. Omar, what's going on? She placed the papers on his desk. These numbers don't add up. How can we claim to prioritize sustainability while cutting essential costs? Omar reviewed the documents in silence before speaking. I'll discuss this with the finance department. Though his hesitation was palpable, he continued. You didn't know about this, did you? Amina pressed, frustration evident in her voice. Omar exhaled deeply, placing the report aside. It wasn't an easy decision, Amina. We needed to balance the budget. Amina stared at him incredulously. Are you compromising the integrity of this project just to appease the investors? It's not that simple, Omar said, shifting uncomfortably. I have responsibilities to them, and I have principles, Amina replied firmly, her words lingering in the air. A quiet challenge that left Omar momentarily speechless. For Amina, the lines were clear. Integrity wasn't negotiable, no matter the stakes. If you don't truly believe in this project, Omar, then it'll never feel authentic, she said, her tone calm yet firm. Omar Kamau stood silent, his jaw tightening at her words. That night, as Amina reflected on their conversation, she decided she needed clarity. Omar was a complex man, but his recent behavior hinted at something deeper. Curious, she began researching the companies tied to the project. What she discovered was telling. Most of them were connected to Omar's family legacy, particularly his late father. The next day, Amina confronted him directly. Omar, she said, her voice steady, why are you so invested in this project? It's not just about sustainability, is it? Omar's eyes shifted, avoiding hers, as though searching for a way out of the question. It's not relevant right now, he said dismissively. It is relevant, Amina insisted. If you want me to trust you, you need to be honest with me, even for a moment. Omar remained quiet, the weight of her challenge pressing down on him. Then with a sigh, he closed his eyes briefly before speaking. This project is my way of undoing what my father did, he admitted. He prioritized profit above all else, and it ruined lives. Growing up, I thought that was the only way to succeed, but now I see it doesn't have to be like that, and I don't want to repeat his mistakes. Amina listened, her expression softening as she absorbed his words. For the first time, she saw Omar as someone vulnerable, wrestling with his past, then determined to do things differently. Then do things differently, she said simply. Show people you can be better. In the days that followed, Omar began making changes to the project's budget, reallocating funds to better align with its ethical goals, even though he knew it might deter some investors. Amina noticed his genuine effort to shift, though she sensed there was still a barrier he couldn't fully overcome. As they worked more closely, their conversations started to venture beyond the project. Amina shared stories about her modest upbringing, the challenges of supporting her family, and her dream of using her creativity to make a meaningful impact. Omar, in turn, opened up about the pressures of living in his father's shadow, the failure of his relationship with Ngozi, and how meeting Amina had changed his outlook. You made me realize that success means nothing if it comes at the cost of losing the people who matter, he admitted one evening during a break. Amina's heart stirred, but she kept her expression neutral. Omar, change takes time. It's not enough to say you'll be different. You have to prove it, and I will, he replied, his voice steady. At a progress event for the project, Amina found herself face-to-face with Ngozi, who seemed intent on lingering wherever Omar was present. It seems you've gained more than just a job, Ngozi said with a sly smile. Amina took a deep breath, keeping her composure. I've worked hard for my place here, Ngozi. Maybe you should try the same. Ngozi let out a laugh, her amusement clear. Omar can be charming when he wants to be, but in the end always reverts to what he is, a man driven by his ego. Good luck changing that. Amina didn't respond, but Ngozi's words left her unsettled. She wanted to believe in the progress Omar was making, but her doubts lingered. Those doubts only deepened when Omar approached her shortly afterward, his expression concerned. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Ngozi has a talent for being unpleasant," Amina replied lightly, trying to deflect the tension. "Don't let her get to you," Omar said. "She's always looking for ways to undermine me, and now she thinks targeting you is the best way to do it." "And why is that?" Amina asked, meeting his gaze. "Why does she think I'm important to you?" Omar hesitated for a moment, then replied simply, "Because you are." His words, though brief, carried weight. Amina found herself at a loss for how to respond. Omar seemed intent on making his feelings clear, but she wasn't ready to trust him fully. In the days that followed, Amina focused on her work, even though Omar's words lingered in her mind. He had been honest, but she knew she couldn't let herself be swayed by words alone. She wanted to believe him, but her instincts kept her cautious. Perhaps it was the fear of being hurt again, or maybe it was just caution born from experience. The final days leading up to the project's launch were a whirlwind of emotion and determination. Amina had poured months of effort into her work, and now as the grand unveiling approached, she realized it wasn't just a professional milestone, but also a deeply personal turning point. Omar had changed, or at least appeared to have changed, but still, Amina wasn't sure if she was ready to trust him again. The launch was set to be a grand event, attended by media, international investors, and key figures in the sustainable development industry. As expected, Omar took on the role of host, but he was insistent that Amina stand by his side. "You're the heart and soul of this project," he had said during one of their last meetings. "I want everyone to know that." Amina agreed, but laid down one condition. "As long as it's clear that my role here is based on merit, I'm not here to be tied to your past mistakes." Omar nodded, his expression serious. "Fair enough. You've earned this entirely on your own." On the day of the event, Amina arrived early to oversee the final preparations. The venue was stunning, a perfect embodiment of the project's ethos: elegance, functionality, and sustainability. Walking through the spaces, she felt a mixture of pride and anxiety. Omar arrived shortly after, impeccably dressed and exuding confidence. But there was something else in his demeanor, a hint of vulnerability that Amina hadn't seen before. Nervously, she asked as he approached, "What's on your mind?" "Nothing, just having you here makes it easier," he replied, his gaze lingering on her, his expression softer than usual. There was something different about him that day, a gentleness that caught Amina off guard. The event began with speeches and presentations highlighting the innovative aspects of the project. Amina was invited to the stage to share her vision and the journey of turning her ideas into reality. Though her nerves were palpable, she felt a surge of calm as she scanned the audience and saw Omar seated in the front row, his face lit with unmistakable pride. "This project isn't just about sustainability," she concluded in her speech. "It's about building a future where purpose and innovation go hand in hand." The audience erupted in applause, but what stayed with her was the look on Omar's face, a mixture of admiration and respect. After the presentations, a reception followed, and Amina found herself surrounded by people eager to learn more about her work. She answered their questions with patience and enthusiasm, though her attention occasionally drifted toward Omar. He moved seamlessly through the room, conversing with investors and industry leaders, yet she couldn't ignore the way his eyes occasionally sought hers. As the evening wore on, Ngozi appeared, true to form, arriving at the least opportune moment. "Well, Amina, it seems you've managed to impress," Ngozi said, her tone teetering between admiration and condescension. "Congratulations." "Thank you, Amina," she replied, her voice measured and her composure intact. "But tell me," Ngozi continued, her words laced with subtle malice, "do you truly believe Omar has changed, or is he still playing the same games?" Amina didn't respond immediately. There was something calculated in Ngozi's tone, as if she were hoping to plant a seed of doubt. "It's not your judgment that matters," Amina said finally, her voice firm. "It's mine." Ngozi gave a slight smirk, but said nothing more. She turned and walked away, leaving Amina alone with her thoughts. Shortly after, Omar approached. "Let me guess, Ngozi was trying to poison your thoughts again? He said in a light tone, though his concern was evident. No, it's not that, Amina said, shaking her head. She just made me realize that I still have doubts. Omar fell silent, his expression contemplative. After a moment, he spoke. I understand, and honestly, if I were in your position, I'd have doubts too. Amina looked at him, surprised by his honesty. Have you really changed, Omar? Or is this just another way to manipulate the world around you? I've changed, he replied firmly, but I don't expect you to believe me just because I say so. I want to prove it with time. Amina didn't respond immediately. Instead, she turned her gaze outward, her mind racing as she tried to sort through her emotions. The warmth of his words lingered, but so did the guardedness she had cultivated to protect herself. Only time would tell if Omar's actions matched his promises. The night wore on, but Amina's discomfort only deepened. There was something unsettling, a weight in her chest she couldn't quite name. When the event finally ended, Omar Kamal walked her to the exit. Thank you for everything, Amina, he said, his voice unusually sincere. This project wouldn't have been possible without you. Amina nodded, her smile faint but polite. It was a good effort, Omar, but that doesn't mean everything is resolved, she replied softly, a trace of sadness in her eyes. I know, Omar admitted. In the days that followed, Amina tried to return to her routine, but thoughts of Omar lingered. He seemed to be keeping his promises. His actions reflected an attempt at change. Yet Amina couldn't shake her doubt. Trusting someone after being let down was a battle she wasn't sure she wanted to fight again. One morning, Amina received an unexpected message from Omar. I want you to see something. Can you come to the building today? She hesitated before replying, curiosity ultimately winning over apprehension. When she arrived, Omar was waiting in the lobby, looking uncharacteristically nervous, an unusual sight for someone typically so composed. What is it you wanted to show me? She asked, folding her arms. Come with me, he said, gesturing toward the elevator. Omar led her to the rooftop terrace. When they stepped out, Amina froze, speechless. The space had been completely transformed into a lush garden filled with native plants and a serene seating area. It looked like something out of a dream. I wanted this project to stand for something meaningful, Omar began, his voice steady. Something that reflects what I've learned while working with you. Amina turned to him, still absorbing the sight before her. You're incredible, Omar, she said softly. Thank you, but this isn't just about the project. It's about you. Omar met her gaze, his expression earnest. I know I still have a long way to go, he said, interrupting her, but I want to walk this path with you, if you'll allow me. His words were simple, free of the calculated tone she had once feared. Amina took a deep breath, her guarded heart beginning to thaw. Maybe I can give it a chance, she said at last, but that doesn't mean it'll be easy. Omar smiled, a genuine smile full of hope. Nothing worthwhile ever is. In the following weeks, the partnership between Amina and Omar grew stronger, but Amina remained cautious. That moment on the rooftop had been symbolic, but she knew trust couldn't be rebuilt overnight. Omar, on the other hand, seemed determined to prove his transformation was real. Over the following weeks, the project gained recognition, and Amina found herself invited to events, interviews, and collaborations with new partners. Omar ensured she received all the credit, consistently highlighting her talent and dedication. Despite this, Amina couldn't shake an underlying unease. Omar was trying too hard, as if he believed he could make up for years of missteps in just a few weeks. Amina wasn't sure if his efforts stemmed from genuine regret or a desire to impress her. One day, Omar asked Amina to join him for a meeting with potential investors. I don't want to present anything without you, he told her. Though hesitant, Amina agreed. The meeting was held in an elegant venue, and the investors, key figures in the industry, were keen on supporting sustainable initiatives. Amina confidently presented her ideas while Omar watched with quiet admiration. When the meeting concluded, one of the investors remarked, Omar, you've discovered a rare talent. I don't often see this level of passion and authenticity. Omar smiled. Yes, she's truly one of a kind. The praise was genuine, but it left Amina uncomfortable. She didn't want to be seen as merely Omar's discovery. She wanted to be recognized for her own efforts. On the way back in the car, Amina finally spoke. Omar, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I need to make something clear. My work and my achievements are my own. Omar seemed taken aback but quickly nodded. I understand, he said sincerely, and I'll make sure everyone else does too. His willingness to take her concerns seriously reassured Amina, allowing her to focus more comfortably on the project. However, an unexpected problem arose. As they progressed, a key supplier began delaying material deliveries, threatening to derail the opening of the project's next phase. Determined to address the issue, Omar called an emergency meeting with the team. We can't let this jeopardize our timeline, he said firmly. Amina, do you have any suggestions? Amina reviewed the reports carefully before proposing an alternative. We could work with a smaller local vendor, she suggested. It might take some effort to adjust, but it could solve the delay. The team considered her idea, and Omar nodded. Let's make it happen, he said with conviction. Amina's solution was implemented, and the project moved forward, proving that their combined efforts and mutual respect were beginning to build a foundation for something truly meaningful. Over time, Amina began to see consistent changes in Omar. He seemed less concerned with his public image and more focused on ensuring the project's success. Small gestures, sincere compliments to the team, ethical decision-making, and even moments when he admitted his own mistakes, told her he was changing. One evening, as they worked late reviewing the final project details, Omar broke the silence with a confession. Working with you has taught me something important, he said softly. Amina looked up, curious. And what's that? She asked. For years, I've been trying to meet everyone else's expectations. My father's, my investors, even Ngozi's. But you never asked for anything from me. You just wanted me to be honest with myself. Amina paused, letting his words sink in. And are you being honest now? She asked quietly for the first time. Omar smiled faintly. I think I am. The grand opening of the project was marked by a formal event attended by influential figures across various industries. Thank you for standing by me tonight, he said. Amina gave him a small but meaningful smile. You're doing well, Omar, but there's still work to be done. He nodded, his expression softening. I know. As she stepped into the car, Amina caught his reflection in the window, and for the first time, felt that perhaps his efforts to change were genuine. In the following days, Omar continued to surprise her. He became actively involved in community projects, supported young entrepreneurs, and funded sustainable initiatives. Amina could see that his actions stemmed from a sincere belief in doing better, not merely to impress her. During quiet nights in her hotel room, Amina found herself thinking about Omar. His words, his actions, even the way he had looked at her replayed in her mind. Upon returning to the city, she made a decision. She needed closure. Without hesitation, Amina headed straight to the office of Kendi Prizes. It was late, but she knew Omar would still be there. When she entered his office, she found him alone, scanning over reports. Omar looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Amina, I wasn't expecting you back so soon. I just got in, she replied, closing the door behind her. But I needed to see you. Omar immediately stood, concern etched on his features. Is something wrong? Yes, Amina said, her voice trembling slightly. I realized something important while I was away. He fell silent, his gaze locked on hers for a moment, vulnerability flashing in his eyes as though he knew this was a pivotal moment. What is it? He asked softly. Amina took a step closer, searching for the right words. During this journey, I saw how much you've changed, Omar. You're no longer the arrogant, distant man I first met. And no matter how hard I tried to deny it, her voice faltered, but she pressed on. I've fallen for you. The confession spilled out like a dam bursting after too long of being restrained. For a brief moment, Omar stood motionless, processing her words, then stepped forward, closing the space between them. Amina, you have no idea how long I've waited to hear that, he said, his voice thick with emotion. She opened her mouth to respond, but he gently took her hands, his gaze steady. I fell for you a long time ago. From the moment you entered my life, everything changed. You made me want to be better, not just for myself, but for something greater. Tears brimmed in Amina's eyes, but she held them back, her heart pounding. I was scared, Omar, she admitted. I was afraid of trusting someone, of opening up, of getting hurt again. But now I'm done running." Without another word, Omar leaned in, and for the first time, they embraced what had been building for so long. The moment was charged with unspoken emotion. Their hearts finally aligned. One evening, during the opening of a new community center they had designed together, Omar stood beside Amina as the crowd applauded. Turning to her, his voice laced with emotion, he said, "Amina, you've changed my life in ways I never thought possible. I don't just want to build projects with you, I want to build a life." Before she could respond, Omar knelt, revealing a small, elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Tears welled up in Amina's eyes, but she smiled through them. "Yes, Omar, yes." Their wedding was simple and intimate, surrounded only by close family and friends. For Amina and Omar, it wasn't just the beginning of a new chapter. It was a testament to how love, trust, and faith could blossom from the most unexpected places. As they stood hand in hand during their honeymoon, gazing at the horizon, Amina felt a profound sense of peace she had never known before. She knew challenges would come, but with Omar by her side, she was ready to face them all. What an incredible journey of transformation, love, and resilience. Amina and Omar's story is a beautiful reminder that sometimes life's greatest blessings come from unexpected places. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on our next heartwarming tale. We've got so many more inspiring stories coming your way. Until next time, take care and remember, love has the power to change everything. See you in the next video.